Lionel Legacy Moguls were probably among the most anticipated O-scale model releases of 2023, and all because of one engine. At the price point of $800, these models aren't cheap, but are considerably more affordable than many other command control steam engines in the O-scale hobby. This expands the market for these models even further than just a popular road name and cab number did, and I'm very happy to see some scale steam from Lionel at a more affordable price point, especially after the highly controversial pricing of the upcoming Baldwin Standard Decapods. However, these are very, very small locomotives and are based around some rather old tooling that Lionel has used multiple times before. And these engines are not without issue. As standard with DynamO Scale product reviews, this is the first of 2 reviews. You're watching the short-term review of the Lionel Legacy 2023 Moguls. So let's start there, the tooling, and the base model itself. The Moguls are based on the Boston and Maine Railroad's B-15 class 260 Moguls. Lionel has been using the tooling since the early 2000s, and they have used or produced new detail parts for these Moguls a few times to allow the engines to replicate the looks of various classes of 260s from different road names. This model is the Strasburg Railroad number 89, 2000s appearance. 89 is a former Canadian National E10A class Mogul, and Lionel did a nice job adding different detail parts more accurate to the E10A class on these 2000s 89 models. The real 89 is undoubtedly why these Moguls were so anticipated. SRC 89 currently operates on the famed Strasburg Railroad of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, hauling tourists through the Amish farmlands where she has garnered quite the fan base over the last 50 years of operating at Strasburg. I did note that Lionel has improved the E10A specific details on 89 over their last run of Strasburg 89 models, and they have added a real coal load in the tender versus the molded and painted fake coal load in previous Mogul runs. Though I'm not entirely sure why the number plate reads Strasburg Railroad, as 89, even at Strasburg, has, to the very best of my knowledge, always worn a Canadian National lettered rectangular plate, or why the grab irons on the side of the boiler curve downwards at the front of the smokebox, as the E10As do not in real life. But those are minor issues which I don't think negatively impact the model's ability to represent 89. The engines do present some operating issues, however, most notably derailing over switches. In my testing, I found that the traction tires were a main cause. However, I also found that the electrical pickup rollers were another primary issue, at least with the Atlas 072 and Atlas high-speed switches that I was testing them over. The tires are too thick and seem to lead to the wheels picking switch points, leading to a derailment. I did contact Lionel about this, and they are sending new tires, so we will see how they work out in the long-term review. In the meantime, I have sets of MTH traction tires on the Moguls. MTH part DE0000025. So far, these have fixed the switch picking issue, and while this is a cheap and simple fix, I don't think it's reasonable for the consumer to have to do this just to use an $800 engine. I did notice on both of my Moguls that the drivers are chipping and actually losing material in these derailments, creating sharp spots on the flanges. This is not something I find occurring on other models, which does make me question the quality of the metals used in these Moguls. I also have to comment on the process to change traction tires on these Moguls. The front wheel set is the set with the tires, meaning accessing the wheels is much more difficult, since most of the wheel is behind the crosshead and crosshead guides. Usually traction tires are on the rear driver set, meaning side rods are all that must be dealt with in order to gain access, and removing one bolt usually grants that access. On these Moguls, I have found that the only way to change tires is to drop the bottom of the engine, which is held on by 8 screws, then drop the first driver set, then remove the hex bolts holding the rods in place. Then once the reels are totally free, tires can be replaced and the process reversed. Next time I change tires, I will be moving the set of drivers with the tires to the rear and the set that is currently on the rear to the front, though I wanted to see how the engine operates with the factory configuration first for this review. Smoke output is wonderful, and the sounds are good, though I do feel there was a lack of effort on Lionel's part here to get accurate sounds, as 89 still operates, getting good audio of the engine, either by recording it themselves or by buying the audio from one of the many rail fans who frequent the SRC. Lionel could have easily and affordably gotten accurate 89 audio onto this model. To me, this is always one of my biggest gripes with models of operating locomotives that don't use any accurate audio. Going forward, I promise you'll hear me complain about this many more times, and not just about Lionel products. Overall, at least with the 89 model, I'm pretty happy with the detailing and paint job. It isn't perfect, but it gets the job done for conveying the look of number 89, and Lionel can't realistically be expected to make new tooling from the ground up for each model, as costs and time commitment would draw out production time and increase costs for the consumer to a level where it'd surely price many out of the hobby, even more than may already be priced out. Surely then, Lionel, an industry leader in the O-gauge world, that accurately printed the E10A classification onto 89 with E10A detail parts, gave the other E10As, which they also printed E10A classification onto, those same E10A detail parts, right? No. Here we have Middletown and Hummelstown 91, a Boston and Maine B15 model with the M&H 91 E10A paint slapped on. I can only wonder why. So I asked them. The response I got back was, we matched details as closely as possible to the two prototypes via photos we had available. I suppose Lionel doesn't have access to the internet. I don't think there's any excuse here for $800 when Lionel clearly has the correct tooling on hand and is aware the engines should look like this. One cannot justify why the other E10As look like a Boston and Maine B15, especially one that has run so recently in excursion service. Is it fixable? Yes. If one can and wants to spend more money and time on modifying the engine to look the way an E10A looks, or can and wants to pay someone else to do just that, for $800. Again, I do not think this is reasonable for the consumer to have to modify their new engine to get it to look correct when the manufacturer has the correct tooling and, in fact, did use it on other engines in the same production run. It isn't something that would have cost Lionel more. The tooling was on hand and being used. It just wasn't used in all the models they should have used it on. A definite lack of understanding the prototypes and lack of research, something Lionel and other manufacturers are guilty of rather frequently. I also wanted to point out that the 91 model had chipping paint directly out of the box. This is yet another item I brought to Lionel's attention. However, this one Lionel chose to completely ignore. Overall, I have to say I'm rather disappointed by the latest run of Lionel's Moguls. It feels like a product that was released without adequate testing or prototype research. A product rushed to completion. I'd much rather have waited another 6 months to a year for a more functional and accurate model. But instead, we have an $800 engine with operating issues and a flagrant disregard for the prototype. Lionel is certainly capable of making better, which to me just makes the failings of these models all the more frustrating. I guess we'll see how they hold up over the next year or so in the long-term review.